Uncle Cage is forced to work, playing the most decadent superhero in history. Welcome to the 2026 newly released Marvel series Spider-Man Noir. Different from the usual cheerful style of the Spider-Man series, this work will take everyone into a dark and gloomy world. The story takes place during the Great Depression in New York. Spider-Man Reilly, played by Nicolas Cage, is the only superhero in this parallel universe. By day, he is an ordinary private detective. Once night falls, Reilly transforms into Spider-Man, who strikes terror into the hearts of all criminals. However, all of this came to an end with the passing of his girlfriend.
That with great power comes great responsibility. Well, she was the greatest responsibility I ever had, and I failed her.
From then on, Reilly mothballed the Spider-Man suit, completely returning to the life of an ordinary person. In the blink of an eye, 5 years passed. Reilly was still that obscure little detective. This day, he was tracking a target named Addison. When crossing the road, accidentally hit by a car. In order to cover up his superpowers, Reilly simply lay on the ground pretending to faint, until the passers-by all gathered around. Only then did he stand up to continue the pursuit. With his super-strong spider sensibility, Reilly tracked all the way to an oil refinery. Only then did he discover that he was not the only one tracking the target. As a result, just as the two sides were in a standoff, Addison suddenly burst into flames. Who would have thought the opponent was also a superpower user? The spreading fire ignited the oil drum. Edison died on the spot in the explosion. The guy who opposed him had already been knocked unconscious by the blast wave. Reilly flipped open the man's wallet, discovering the other party is also a private detective. His heart was filled with growing doubts. What on earth is so special about Edison? That he was actually targeted for capture by several forces at the same time. Could it be because of his pyrokinesis superpower? It is only a pity that, with the death of Addison, the commission task Reilly took on was also declared a failure. The detective agency's only assistant began to complain that it was fine that he had not received his salary for several months. But if they continue to harvest absolutely nothing like this, I'm afraid even the phone service will be cut off. Just as Reilly frowned and pondered how to generate income, a business actively came to the door. This man suspects his wife is having an affair, so he commissioned Reilly to help gather evidence. This kind of work is simply second nature to Spider-Man. He accepted this commission without the slightest hesitation.
Jan will get your info in a small retainer. Come back day after tomorrow and...
After the employer left, Reilly was invited to the cafe to meet his journalist friend Robbie. He is one of the few people who knows about Reilly's past identity. As soon as we met, they started pouring out their grievances. Since Spider-Man went into retirement, the expansion of the mob boss Silvermane has been unstoppable, even colluding with government officials in secret. Now the entire city is under his rule, becoming rampant with crime, and the people have no way to make a living. Robbie hopes Reilly can put on the battle suit again, to become again that hero who saves the people from fire and water. However, Reilly has long been disheartened, directly stating that fighting the Silver Sect is completely meaningless, even if they fall. Tomorrow a new Silver Sect will still rise. But he did not expect that the front-page headline of that day's newspaper was a sudden fire at the mansion of the underground Emperor Yin Zong. Even he himself was almost burned alive. It just so happened that Edison, whom he met last night, possessed the ability to control fire. Reilly speculated that this fire might be related to Edison. However, he could not worry about that much at this moment. It is still better to first complete the adultery case commissioned by the employer. Reilly staked out at a hotel for a whole day, and finally waited for the target person, Carter. He followed the other party to the elevator entrance, but ended up being stopped by the security guard. Left with no choice, Reilly could only choose the fire escape, climbing all the way to the top floor in one breath. The Spider-Man of the past was already too tired to catch his breath. Quietly opening the main door to a crack, Reilly saw Carter tangling with a man. Without any hesitation, he picked up the camera. Who knew that the next second the two people would actually start wrestling? Reilly could least tolerate seeing women being bullied, and actually, against all precedent, use superpowers. Returning to the detective agency the next day, the employer who had commissioned him to capture Edison actually came to the door. After all, he had paid the deposit in advance. Reilly chuckled, not revealing the news of Edison's death, but instead took the opportunity to raise the price on the spot, because Edison possessed the ability of arson and was no ordinary person. How could a mere $30 reward settle this? The employer was so angry that they slammed the door and left directly. This was also exactly the result Reilly wanted. Actually, he was also very curious about who this employer really was. Quietly driving and following behind the other party. Also traveling along was another private detective who had captured Addison in the beginning. His name is Patrick, who is also very interested in Edison's superpowers. That very night, he agreed to Reilly's invitation to join forces. Only the two of them never expected that employer actually walked into the abandoned mansion of In Zong. It turns out the one who actually published the capture mission was this boss of the underworld. In Zong seemed to have known long ago that Edison possessed superpowers. Guessed that his own luxury mansion was precisely the one burned down by the other party. Only he still did not know that Edison was already dead, threatening to capture the other party at all costs. After quietly exiting the room, Patrick's face was full of excitement. He wanted to use the news of Edison's death to extort a huge sum of money from the Silver Sect. But Reilly did not want to get involved in this kind of trouble, stating bluntly that not just any money can be earned. After returning to the office, the assistant had already developed last night's photos. Only what surprised Reilly was that the person Carter met with in secret was actually the mayor of New York. He did not want to be dragged into a vortex of trouble for no reason, so he immediately called in the cuckolded employer. Bluntly said his wife is doing very well, has not cheated with any man at all.
You know how loyal she is.
And even took the initiative to refund the other party's deposit. Having just sent off the cuckolded employer, Reilly's spider sense activated without any warning. The strange thing was, no danger occurred in the surroundings. Who would have thought that in the next moment, the assistant would issue a threat and warning? If the salary is not paid again this month, he would resign to go sell goods at the department store. In order to increase the income of the firm, the assistant thought of a bad idea, since a big figure like the mayor could not be provoked. But they could use the photos to demand a sum of money from Carter. After hearing this, Reilly's heart stirred. That very night, he came to the bar where the other party sang as a resident performer. Who would have thought Carter is actually a minor celebrity? Reilly sat alone in the corner and began to carefully size up this unfaithful woman. The man's brow furrowed tighter and tighter. Carter's graceful figure and exquisite appearance actually bore some resemblance to his girlfriend. After finishing singing the song, Reilly finally recovered from the shock. At this moment, he suddenly realized that the mafia boss In Zong was actually sitting in the audience as well. However, after receiving a report from his subordinate, he hurriedly left the scene, only to see In Zong turn around and come to a basement. Tied in front of him is precisely the private detective Patrick. Previously, he had originally planned to extort a sum of money. As a result, he encountered In Zong, who did not play by the rules of martial ethics. In the face of a life-and-death crisis, he honestly confessed the entire process of Addison's death. However, In Zong did not let Patrick go after getting rid of him, and even threatened to get rid of another insider, Reilly. But at this time, Reilly did not know that trouble was coming. He found Carter resting backstage and took out the photos of the other party dating the mayor, asking how much Carter planned to pay to buy back the negatives. Who knew Carter did not know this routine of blackmail at all. He rejected Reilly's proposal to his face, and after the other party left, turned around and signaled his bodyguards to leave the bar. It turned out Carter was preparing to take back the negatives by force. Unfortunately, this time he can be said to have kicked his steel plate. Reilly found himself being followed, so he quietly came to an abandoned construction site. Seeing no one around, this bodyguard stopped pretending and said straight out that if the negatives were handed over, there would be no trouble. Reilly naturally refused to compromise. The two people quickly wrestled together. As a result, he didn't even use his superpowers and directly knocked the other party down. But he didn't expect the bodyguard to struggle to stand up, and the surface of his body actually began to turn into sand. Who would have thought he also possesses special abilities? Reilly had not yet recovered from the shock, before being sent flying by a sandbag-like stone. Under such desperate circumstances, he could no longer hide his own superpowers, using spider silk to leap back to the rooftop in just a single encounter, knocking the bodyguard to the ground once again. Just as Reilly was about to step forward to ask for details, Carter came running up in a hurry. Unexpectedly, the bodyguard actually did not remember what had just happened. Reilly knew that whenever anything involved superpowers, that would cause heaven-sent trouble, so he took the initiative to hand over the film, not wanting to have any more intersection with the guy in front of him. It was just a pity that Reilly once again lost a large sum of money for nothing. This time the assistant really couldn't hold it together anymore. Hurriedly got up to pack things and prepare to leave. However, just at this moment, Carter took the initiative to walk into the office, claiming there is a big order that needs Reilly to complete. The bodyguard who followed him last night has gone missing. although this matter reveals strangeness everywhere. But considering the law firm on the verge of bankruptcy, Reilly ultimately still accepted this commission. After receiving a $50 deposit on the spot, the assistant also did not mention the matter of resigning again. Subsequently, Carter began to introduce the bodyguard's information. The other party's name is Flint, once one of the capable lieutenants under Ian Zong. Half a year ago suddenly acquired the superpower of sandification. But no one knows where on earth this power came from. Reilly is likewise full of curiosity about this Flint. So that afternoon, he sneaked into the other party's apartment to investigate. In a wooden box in the drawer, he found a stack of photos. One of them was a group photo of Flint and his comrade in arms. Reilly recognized one of them as the arsonist, Addison. Both of them had awakened superpowers not long ago. This is clearly not a simple coincidence. Just as he fell into thought, his spider sense sent an alarm. Reilly dodged and just hid in the wardrobe. Two men in suits pushed the door and walked in. It turns out the Flint disappearance also aroused the vigilance of the Silver Sect, so they specially sent someone to investigate. Reilly found his hat was still left on the table, so he used spider silk to quietly retrieve it to the wardrobe. However, the water stains remaining on the table still exposed the fact that someone had been there. The man in the suit wanted to open the wardrobe, but the lock ring was tightly wrapped in spider silk. The man only assumed it was ruined from years of neglect, and did not investigate any further. Meanwhile, the little assistant on the other side was not idle either. He made a special trip to the Archives Bureau, and conveniently snatched Flint's resume. It turns out he used to be a soldier, and even participated in the famous Battle of Argonne. But after being discharged from the military, he achieved nothing, ultimately reduced to becoming Ian Zong's high-level thug. At this time, Reilly thought of that fire-controlling Esper again. It seems all clues point to the same person, and that is the mob boss Ian Zong. Only Reilly never expected, while investigating Ian Zong himself, this big boss was also targeting him at the same time. Reilly had just returned home when he encountered two aggressive thugs. The man did not want to expose his superpowers, so they obediently allowed themselves to be captured. After finding out in the car that the two were Ian Zong's subordinates, Reilly decisively chose to take action. Where'd he go? Check the side. But when waiting until the second day and returning to the office, only to see the assistant cleaning up the mess all over the floor. It turns out Ian Zong's subordinates failed to catch Reilly, so they ran to the office to make trouble. At that time, the assistant even had a pistol pointed at their head, but he still never revealed the boss's whereabouts. Looking at the assistant whose face was covered in tears, Reilly felt extremely guilty, directly stating that he himself had implicated the other party. But he did not expect the assistant to shake their head as if it didn't matter, indicating that starting from today he is resigning and leaving. For these past 5 years, the assistant has always been hoping Reilly would cheer up and become the great hero fighting crime once again. In the end, he only waited for disappointment time after time. The assistant's departure completely touched Reilly's bottom line. He was once the guardian of this city. As it turns out, now he cannot even protect the people around him. At this moment, Reilly finally stopped running away. He dug out the battle suit he hadn't touched for 5 whole years. At this time, Ian Zong had just finished inspecting a batch of smuggled fine wine. But on the way back, some subordinates spotted a figure traversing through the air. Everyone immediately showed terrified expressions, because they recognized this was the Spider-Man who had been missing for 5 years. The subordinates, relying on having hot weapons in hand, mustered up their courage and fired to intercept. But in the face of spider sense, these movements are just like children playing house. In just a few breaths, all the lackeys were beaten flat on the ground. Ian Zong knew he could not escape, so he sat in the car without moving, quite straightforwardly. Sorry, where are my manners? Another drink. No, but Spider-Man's appearance this time was not to kill, but to warn Ian Zong. Never again provoke the detective named Reilly. Don't even touch the people close to him. Just as Reilly returned to the office, the phone on the desk suddenly rang. From the other end came the anxious voice of reporter Robbie. It turns out the police had already received a tip-off from an informant, setting up an ambush at the pier in advance, preparing to capture Ian Zong along with the goods in one fell swoop, but did not expect Spider-Man's appearance, instead allowed Ian Zong to escape by a strange combination of circumstances. This made Reilly somewhat not know whether to laugh or cry. Could it be that he did a bad thing with good intentions? In the dark, he always felt an invisible black hand was secretly controlling everything. The above is the content of episodes 1 and 2 of Spider-Noir. Friends who like this, please continue to follow